Okay, this is my next episode in my book, Not a Victim, a Survivor, Life Beyond Domestic Violence and Rape. It's part one of Life Beyond Silence, a series that I did. I'm still trying, I guess, to finish and put up the last two books on Amazon. I wanted to do the podcast because I wanted people to hear from myself in my own words what I went through and maybe to elaborate on some of the parts of the book that I didn't. Um, so let's get into the next episode. I remember telling Gabby one time I never thought of myself as an American, but as a Kentuckian. And sometimes when a foreigner such as a German or Turkish person, which is common nationalities in Germany, would call me an American, I would be a little put out. Simply for the fact that we are all grouped together and not all Americans I meet in Germany reflected what I considered to be an American to be. I preferred to be noted for coming from Kentucky rather than being lumped together like that. After all, each state in itself is quite different. Therefore, the people from each state act differently. And although I'm proud to be from the United States, some of the other Americans living in Germany made me ashamed to be grouped with them. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say all Americans I met overseas were acting in an ill-mannered way, but some were. Sometimes I would see grown American GIs with very young German girls while they had wives back home in the States. Then you had GIs and their wives that were together over there that, hold on a second, that acted extremely discourteous and crude around German hosts. For example, Gabby and I was waiting for the bus one time at the bus stop, and a wife of some soldier would push past an elderly German woman trying to get on the bus. And then we would hear the Germans begin to make comments on how Americans were so rude. I remember Gabby and I just looked at each other shaking our heads on how no wonder some people felt poorly of the army being in their country. I never thought of myself as a racist or a bigot, but in Germany you tend to put different perspectives on a lot of things you don't normally think about. No, you're right. I had absolutely no idea what the army was going to be like, but I do know how to show respect and how to be courteous. And both of those go a long way, especially in a foreign country. However, being in the service does have some good points, but most are geared around the servicemen themselves, and unfortunately not their families. The healthcare system that was in play was poor compared to the normal facility in the States, and most military personnel have the outlook that you shouldn't complain because it's free. So you should take what you get, or you just don't use it. Actually, the German healthcare system, from what I saw, was exceptionally good compared to ours. Some of the soldiers I met and talked with seemed to have serious problems, such as drugs, alcohol, depression. Most GIs had German girls that they were sleeping with, and more often than not, you would see them end up getting pregnant. No, not all servicemen had problems like that, but they had the attitude, the party while you can, while you only live young once. Some I knew were in some kind of self-destructive mode, seemingly to cling to life by only a thread. Their only goal of staying focused enough was to get up every morning for duty, finish their time in the army. Although they mocked it, I knew a lot of them the army was all they had, After all, most had known nothing but the Army. Most were really young and right out of high school. They had gone straight into the Army in hopes of seeing the world. However, most found habits that would be hard to break. Gabby and I were only a month apart in age, and many of the GIs thought that we were cool for two married women. We weren't like other girl, girls or their young girlfriends or their wives that came over to Germany and then really never lived anywhere but American housing. The Army's version of the apartment accommodation set aside for American military families. That's what American housing is. You see, most families that come overseas get on base housing, and except for an occasional trip off base sightseeing or something, they they never stray into the German economy, except with their husbands. Instead, Gabby and I were actually out walking around the base on a daily basis, though we were usually dragging several kids with us. After all, we lived in the economy and we did almost everything together, and without our husbands as well. So a lot of soldiers knew us on sight, and we actually knew a lot of people, including German, Turkish, and American servicemen. I learned something back then, that boundaries in your life are basically set by the ability you have to conform and accept what you're presented with. So you don't agree, only you can break away and change what holds you in. Not to mention, people shouldn't accept everything, especially if you feel it's wrong. They should instead change it. To Gabby and me, the Army was made up of many nationalities and many different classes of people. The Army was composed of middle class whites, some lower class whites, commonly referred to as white trash. There were blacks that were nice and others that acted very ghetto. There were young servicemen, older servicemen, established military men called lifers, meaning they had been in a long time and they were making a career out of the service. The Army had a lot of newlyweds and Mexicans, along with Koreans. Basically, name it and the military has it, and most were easy to spot. All you had to do was look around and be able to tell what category they fit into. Germany was made up of many cultures too. Older Germans that accepted the Americans because because they most of them remembered the war and knew the reason that they were there. Then there were young Germans who didn't appreciate the Americans and wanted the army to leave. There were Turkish who unfortunately not was not well thought of by either Germans or Americans. The Turkish, however, pretty much kept to their own and seemed to live in a lower class ghetto like German housing, with other nationalities scattered in. I can honestly say, though, I never had any trouble while in Germany from anyone. Although my housemeister, which a housemeister is a caretaker of an apartment building, and me didn't always get along well. She was always complaining about my kids. She didn't seem to like children, especially mine. Gabby, on the other hand, always seemed to have more going on at her home than me. She was always having parties, most consisted of friends of her husband's. To understand why, you'd have to understand it's a whole different life over there. Customs, people, nightlife, and then mixed with soldiers, and you get a lot of good times and good friends that you'll remember forever and lots of good memories. One thing Gabby and me both agreed on is that in Germany, things were much more relaxing, laid back, and we didn't seem to have the day in and day out problems that we do in the United States. Although we never lacked for excitement, sometimes I really miss Germany. I miss the adventure, the culture. I wish in a way that my kids would have been older because they don't remember all the things I do. They were simply too young back then. And my third daughter doesn't remember it at all. She was way too young. She was born there, and so young that by the time we left, she didn't have any memories of it. Maybe someday we can go back. I hope so. Just for a visit. I mean, I miss it. I really, really miss it. It was a good experience and one that I'll never forget. So, Kyle and I seemed to grow apart once Gabby left. I don't know if it was because she helped to keep me on an even keel or if somehow she had overshadowed the problems that we had until they all had but blackened out. Then she left for the States. The fog lifted and our marriage problems became clearer. All I know is we started to fall apart rather quickly at that. I'm sorry as I'm sorry to say as time passed, it became increasingly evident that my love for Kyle had all but gone, although I really can't tell you why or what made it fall apart. All I know is the main thing is after which I didn't see us ever being all I know the main thing is the main thing after which I didn't see us ever being able to get our life back together. Our sex life had all but stopped, and I really didn't enjoy him touching me anymore. I found out that he had masturbated in his car at lunchtime and that he had a stockpile of disgusting, dirty books. I had even caught him sneaking to watch porno movies because he knew I didn't care for them, all of which tore down every feeling of trust I had in him, making me sick to my stomach to think I wasn't enough for him and his gratification was coming elsewhere. It made me quickly pull away from him. Anyway, after Gabby left, we decided that each of us needed a little time away. At first, I thought the idea was to go out and have a good time and then come back and refreshed and not get into a fight. All we did was fight from the time we got up until the time we went to bed. However, it ended up being the room we gave each other that eventually killed us. Our means to an end, our downfall. I met this girl named Chantel just about the time Gabby was due to leave, and I babysit for her, we became friends. We started going out with each other to get away from both our husbands. At first, it was just to play a couple of games of pool and have a couple of drinks. Then I took her to a nightclub called The Flug. I'd been there before with Gabby, and I have always loved to dance. So I thought we could go and just mingle. Wrong. Her marriage wasn't going good either. And although it was supposed to be an innocent night out on the town, it didn't turn out that way. It gradually became common for us to stay until closing and really get wasted. Although weren't really looking for men, they seemed to flock to Chantel like ducks to water. After all, she was tall, blonde, and very pretty, and proved to be in some ways wilder than me. My husband had told me that it might be good for us to go out separately. He would go out one night and I could go out another, so someone would always be there with the kids. I started feeling better, happier, more than I'd been in a long time. Cal also seemed to be enjoying itself, but we really didn't think it was helping our situation. But you know that feeling you get when no matter how much you want something, you shouldn't do it. Like you're going to get hooked on it, addicted in some way. Well, I got that feeling, but I couldn't relay the message to Kyle, and although I didn't want us to fall apart, I was snowballing and couldn't stop. I knew our marriage was over way before it was. Chantel eventually met this guy she was really interested in. Then I found myself starting to look for one too. I wanted to have what she had, someone that made me feel like a real woman, something Kyle had been not able to do for so long. I wanted to see stars, have passion, to make someone to attend to make me attempt to make me feel wanted. I wanted to be loved, and I know what you're thinking. And you're probably right. Hadn't I searched my whole life for this mystery prince? When was I ever going to give up? He wasn't real. He was a dream. After all, there's no real prince. Oh my gosh. That is a sentence that is so true. I don't think there is a real prince out there. I just don't. I think for some people, you meet the right person, and that person gives 150%, and you give 150%, and everything is great. I do. I think some people find that person, but I think a lot of people find far less. And I think if you don't give all of yourself, and even more if you can, if you don't give it to a relationship, I think it falls apart. There's just, there's a lot of people that go into relationships and they give what they think is all they can give, and they look for the other person to give just as much. And when the other person doesn't, there's a lot of feelings that come into play, a lot of, I don't know, regrets that come into play, and you start looking at that other person as they're not pulling their weight, or they're not making you feel like a woman, or they don't watch TV with you, they don't eat with you, they go out, you are are stuck at home. There's just so many different avenues that can happen, and I think if you're in a relationship, and let's say you are trying to find your prince, you have to find somebody that gives their all, and that wants the same things as you, that that is equally wanting a relationship that is calm and quiet and loving and peaceful and happy and funny. You want somebody that has the qualities that you do, the that has the goals maybe that you do, um, that will stand up for you, that will be there for you. And if you don't find that, that's okay. But at that time in my life, I still hadn't given up hope. I wanted to find somebody that filled those spots for me, but I hadn't given up hope yet, and a lot of things have changed. I realize now that I'm older that a lot of things do change, and that finding someone that's perfect is just not realistic. And the best thing is to find somebody that's willing to work as hard as you are for a relationship. Okay, that's where I'm going to stop for now. I know that I've been going long on these episodes, probably too far long. I just, I get started and I want to relay as much as I can. The book is pretty long, I have to admit, and I guess I just get started and I can't quit. But I wanted you to know I appreciate every episode that you read. I truly do. And I'm sorry I'm kind of long winded and just talk, talk, talk. I really am. But I'm just trying to let you know how I feel and how I did feel. A lot of things have changed over the years for me. A lot. And I've learned a lot. And I regret a lot. And I say it over and over that I do have regrets. But you can't change them. You can't go back. And I know that. It's been really hard for me lately. I'll get into it more later on, but my daughter that I did have in Germany, she is going through something. I don't know what, but we've kind of been on the outs, and it's hurtful. It's painful and hurtful, and I have grandkids that I dearly love, and it's really impacting me. I'm a lot older now. I'm probably a lot wiser, and I can't say anything. She's a grown person, and it's her mistakes in her life to make them. And all I can do is just be me and keep waking up every morning and keep moving forward. But I will have to admit, it's really hard. I'm alone now, and being alone is not easy for anybody. But she's my daughter, and I'm worried, and I'm hurt. And to be honest, I'm tired. Really, really tired. Okay, I'm going to leave it at that, and I will be back. Thank you for listening to my podcast. I really, truly appreciate it. Please buy my book if you want to. It's also available on e-reader. But if you're listening to my podcast, you're probably getting just as much or more. Thank you. Bye-bye.